There was a question that we had from yesterday, and it was based around, well, will there be animals in hell, but also kind of what will hell be like? What will there be in hell?
Yeah.
Do we
Hell's
have
gonna
any
have
image?
Big animals.
Big animal, yeah, with big teeth. Yeah.
Every animal is gonna look like that. Remember, we all grew up on that book, or I did anyway. It was called like The Kid Who Dreams, and he goes into Monsterland. And
Yeah.
he ends up being the king of the monsters.
It's going to be like
It's
that.
like when I think of those big monsters.
No, yeah. When it comes to what hell is like, obviously the last place you should be going is the Divine Comedy. Dante Alighieri himself clarified this is not divine scripture any more than the Apocrypha. It was just a poetic observation about the afterlife given Italian culture and background.
And you're talking about Dante.
Yeah, Dante Alighieri. Dante's Inferno, as it's oftentimes called, but the Divine Comedy is a 3-part sonnet, which the first is the Inferno, then Paradise, and so on and so forth. But when we're talking about what hell is like, the passage you're referencing, Nina, in reference to worms, there's also a parallel passage in Matthew, but in Mark chapter 9 and verse 48, Jesus says, where their worm does not die, nor is their fire quenched. And I think the best way to understand Jesus' point is not just to read the whole passage in context, we can do that if you'd like, but to notice the ownership of that worm. You see, in Mark 9 and in Matthew as well, Jesus has made one of the 3 illustrations he's used as a point of comparison to what hell is. The first and the most significant, I think, that we associate it with is in Revelation 20, where it's described as a lake of fire. Now, I've been to lakes and I've interacted with fire. Seeing the two together would be very unpleasant. Likewise, there's another description Jesus uses in the gospel accounts multiple times, describing it as outer darkness, a total separation from light and isolation. That is another use of pictures and words to describe the state of separation from God, the second death, as it's called, death meaning separation. The third is this one, and it's actually the earliest one. It was a reference to what was literally the garbage dump of Jerusalem, Gehenna, or the Valley of Hinnom. It used to be a beautiful place, not to say hell was, but note the comparison. It was a place where human sacrifice was performed in order to appease Solomon's many wives. And when they sacrificed these children in idolatrous practices, it eventually caught up with them, and the consequences were they had to spend 70 years in exile in Babylon. When they came back, they learned their lesson. They weren't going to do that again, so they not only tore down all the high places, as they were called, terms for pagan altars, but they also specifically converted places associated with what they understood now as great evil and made it so that no one would even want to touch those areas again unless they had to. And so Gehenna, or the Valley of Hinnom, was this picture of just a place you did not want to go. It was stinky. It was full of a constant state of rotting, all the dead bodies and animals and stuff that they'd throw there if they weren't given proper Jewish burials. It was associated with that rot, with that constant burning to dispose of the garbage and waste, and of course of decay. And that's the picture of that worm, that the creatures causing this rot, this stink, aren't going away. You know, we kind of take for granted sometimes that a fly has a 48-hour lifespan, and we usually spend 3/4 of it trying to kill it ourselves. But the point being made is the cause of the rot, the ownership of that rot is their worm. Your worm will not die. Your fire will not be quenched. That state of destruction, that's the same point that's being made. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, and other essays and letters as well, used an illustration to describe hell in that, answering the question, is this symbolic or is this literal? A literal lake of fire. I personally would take the position that this is symbolic, and he says you better hope it's literal, because if it is symbolic, a symbol is intended to communicate something that we can't understand with something we can. Now, note the common parallels and themes here, Nina. What does separation from God entail? Darkness, total separation from light and isolation, not something you voluntarily participate in unless you're going to a cave diving experience or something. Generally, people get unnerved by that. Second is a lake of fire. Made the joke already, so I won't repeat it. And the third is a garbage dump. Again, not the usual field trip, although nowadays I think that would be preferable. The point being made is this. When we're looking at what hell is described as, Nina, the one and main focus of what makes it not good is the same focus inverted of what makes heaven good. And as far as religions are concerned, Bo, you can maybe affirm this or deny it. We are told an abysmally low amount of the glories of heaven compared to other world religions. I mean, Islam can't go into enough detail about comparing it to a brothel, right? And, Sai Balba, that goes into livid detail about hell and ancient Mayan paganism and so forth, the underworld and the Egyptian Book of the Dead and Greek and, African mythologies. All these things are going into a lot of these details. When it comes to what we know about heaven and hell, one thing matters on both ends. Heaven is with Jesus. Hell, what's it like there? Jesus isn't there. Now note, there are passages like Revelation chapter 14 where it notes that those who receive the mark of the beast in particular, but those who will be separated from God, are tormented in the presence of the Lamb. But there's a note of point about that. In the book of James, we note, every good and perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. When you are separated from God, you're basically subjected to God's glory, whether you like it or not. That's just the ongoing reality of existence. You can't escape infinity. But the fact that you're in a state of wrath before Him rather than mercy is what makes that internal state of anguish. Because notice, the Bible never uses the word torture to describe hell. It uses torment, an internal state of anguish, from the fact that you're in the presence of someone that you hate, that you want nothing to do with, that someone whose beauty and majesty just grinds on you. I, to my shame, can associate people I've met in high school that would be associated with this when they seem to, be doing something even decent and acceptable, doing their jobs properly. I'd want to undercut it or just distance myself from it entirely because that person was there. Well, understand, an eternal state resisting, hating, and despising the source of everything good inverts that. And knowing that God has made a provision, a means of respect for you, not to unleash your anguish and hatred and animus of God on all those around you, He is able to quarantine you and everyone who shares your nature of rebellion against God from those who want to enjoy Him. We call that hell. Now, as far as there being animals designed for hell, that's no more true than there being people designed for hell. Animals aren't moral agents. They follow instinct, not ethics. But if, on the other hand, we look at what Scripture lays out for us in people, the state we call hell, in Matthew 25 in particular, states it was prepared for the devil and his angels. Why? Rebellion. They don't want God. They don't want that state of fellowship with God that they were created for. He gives them a means of provision and provides that open door, or rather closed door, to anyone who likewise doesn't want that fellowship. So understand that, Nina, and make sure that we don't get this pagan underworld-esque picture of what hell is like. The reality is there is one thing and one thing only that should motivate you for heaven and dissuade you from hell: the person of Jesus. That should always be what you take away from Scripture. I don't want to go there. Jesus is in the other place.
Yeah, Nina, a very fascinating question too, and I think it's one that kind of comes up, especially through our entertainment of our movies. I think of like the popular Lord of the Rings series. When you see kind of demonic kind of entities, riding on horses or things like that, we tend to kind of go, "Whoa, man! What is the after? What is
evil horse?
Yeah, it's the evil horse. That kind of idea. The four horsemen and and things like that. I think it's good always to go back to what we do know about animals. God created the animals, and He said it was good. And I think we have to remember that when God created the animal kingdom, whether it's the insect or the warm-blooded creature, they were subjected to futility, meaning they were subjected. Romans 8 tells us that the whole creation was subjected to the fall, of Adam and Eve. And so that isn't, animals' purpose is to be a good thing. And so, I rely on that. I can't see God like creating creatures and going, okay, I'm creating them to go hang out in hell. That doesn't sound like the God of the Bible at all.
He
No,
didn't create us for hell either.
right.
Right.
So, animals are created and they are called good, and they have been brought underneath the fall, meaning they face the ramifications of the fall of humans. And I would imagine in the restoration, what the Bible calls the restoration of all things, animals, are a part of that, restorative part, just as the creation of the stars and, everything, the galaxies, everything.
Yeah, read Isaiah 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a big thing I hear you saying is that what is that quote that I've heard you say it recently at memorials? I don't think it's the word life, but life is eternal no matter what state it's in.
Right.
Is it life?
Death. Death is
Death
eternal.
is eternal, right? So I think it's wishful thinking to think that we'll just burn up if we don't make it to heaven. We'll just burn up,
Right.
because that's not so bad. We'll just be gone. We don't know, but death is eternal.
Yes.
No
right.
matter what state, no matter where.
Yeah.
And there must be an answer for the things we've committed against God and His
Yeah.
creation.
It's a very challenging thought.
Yeah.